Aloha, everybody. We are back to another episode of the Divine Quantum Podcast. I am Yui.
I'm Isabella.
And we have an amazing guest today, Jesse Wynyard. He's a rapper, coach, creator, entrepreneur, and spiritual life coach. Jesse, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for reaching out and love the work that you're doing in the world, spreading the good vibes and the love and the light and helping people around the world. It's much needed at this time.
Yeah, we can say the same about you. You do an amazing work, very inspirational to all of us in spreading so much light and love to the world. But before we start diving into this podcast, we like to start diving into your roots. And we would like to know, to share with our listeners a little bit more where you're from, how was it like growing up, so people can get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. So I was born and raised in New Zealand. My father was indigenous, so my father was Polynesian Maori, so very closely connected to the Hawaiian culture and races. And my mum was European. And yeah, basically, long story short, without going into all the details, I was really born into a very traumatic life. I was raised in a lower socioeconomic area, also known as the hood. And yeah, there was just a lot of violence, a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, a lot of broken households where I was raised. And it was also a big part of our culture as well. There's a lot of broken families and stuff like that. So for me, I was quite traumatized from a very young age. My father left when I was about 6 or 7. My mum was working multiple jobs to make ends meet. And because my father left actually, from a very young age, he was my indigenous side, right? So when he left, I almost had this like disconnection from my indigenous side. And a big part of my journey, as I got older, was dealing with those insecurities or that lack of self-belief or lack of understanding of who I truly was. I felt like I was always trying to pretend to be someone that I'm not, trying to fit in a world, of people that trying to impress people that I didn't even really know, pretending to be someone that I'm not. And that was a large part of my life, especially my earlier years. And because of that, I ended up getting into a lot of trouble. I developed a lot of, I guess you would consider them mental health issues, in the sense that I wasn't able to deal with my emotions. As a young man, didn't really know about emotions, how that worked. So I had a lot of anger, I had a lot of rage built up from a very young age, didn't know how to process it. But I'm very thankful that my mum was always a very spiritual person. I was raised religious in the Christian religion, but we're kind of like in and out of the religion simply because there was a lot of our experiences in the religion were quite negative. So there were a lot of negative experiences in like more of the church and the religious side. But I'm grateful because it gave me that spiritual connection to God, universe, source. And my mum was always very, very spiritual as well. So even though I was raised in a very like chaotic environment, I had grounding in that, I guess, higher power from a young age. And even though I kind of went off track, I like ran away from home, dropped out of high school, got involved in a lot of illegal activity, getting into a lot of fights, arrested, all that kind of stuff that you get into, selling drugs when I was a
bad boy.
Yeah, bad boy, yeah. And that was my life for a long time, until I was about 18. So I dropped out of high school, but when I turned 18, I was in like a really negative environment, living in a drug house, just not really in walking a positive path. And I had a couple of experiences that could have led me to getting arrested for a very long time, as well as potentially killed. And when I got into those experiences, it was kind of like a wake-up call. And then that's when I really just decided to get my life back on track. And my mum played a big role in that. She was kind of like my spiritual mentor in a way. And when I decided to get my life back on track, that's when my mum started to really teach me more about, the universal laws, manifestation, law of attraction, and stuff like that. I was a broke young kid from the hood, and I had nothing to lose, everything to gain. So when she told me about this information, I started to read books. I started to really just dive into it because I didn't have anything else, you know. So that's when I started, I guess, consciously creating my life and reality. And within a very, very short time frame, I was able to turn my life around and move on to a more positive path of, I guess, personal growth and creating the life that I wanted. Got to travel, became a coach, became a father. You know, I've got a 10-year-old son now, which has been an amazing journey. Fast forward till now, there's been a lot of highs and lows. My mum passed away when I was 22. She's cancer, brain cancer. Went through a big breakup, built companies, achieved a lot of success, failed a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and still learning to this day. But it's been I can't help but be grateful for all of the highs and lows because it's helped me become the person that I am today. And here we are.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
A lot of things happen in a short time in your life, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things happen. I had to grow up quickly. I had to grow up really quickly.
But I have so many questions from everything that you just said. What was the biggest lesson you learned from your mom on that?
That's a great question. So I feel like my mum taught me a lot of really valuable lessons. Like we had an interesting relationship. It was actually, we had quite a negative relationship for a long time because I was just like the rebellious kid, you know. But what she always taught me was, I think one of the biggest things she always taught me was, I guess, the limitless potential that we have as human beings. It's something that she really instilled with me from a young age. And because we're broke and we were poor, we didn't have any money, or we had money, but we didn't have much money. She, it's almost like I had to rely upon my faith in God and the universe because I didn't really have anything else in my physical reality. So I had to have that hope that there was something bigger and greater. And my mum always said to me that, you've got limitless potential. And she always talked to me about the mind, the human mind, and our brain, and the capacity that the things that we have within our brain to be able to learn and grow and to really just do and become whatever we want to become. And that really stuck with me throughout my entire life, because as I continue to grow through life and new growth opportunities came up for me, I always had that core belief that I could do it. I could do anything I put my mind to, and no matter how hard it is or how challenging it is, I can become it, I can do it, I can learn it, and I can create it. And I think that as a foundational belief was huge for me. And obviously another lesson that she really taught me was when she passed away. It really opened, I guess it kind of took me through on a bit of a healing journey of, I went through a phase when my mum passed away where I almost kind of disconnected from my spirituality for a while, because I almost didn't believe in it anymore, because I had this belief like, if my mum died and she was such a good person, then everything everything I believe in must not be real, And I went through this phase of like rejecting God, rejecting spirituality, rejecting the universe and everything, and got really caught up in addictions and just human being things. And during that time, I had to go on a journey of healing, and really just learning about the duality of life and death and everything in between. And that whole journey, I was able to learn through my mum when she passed over. So when she passed over, it kind of opened me up to, I guess, more, I guess you'd consider like clairvoyant type abilities, where I was able to connect with her, which was a new experience for me. And through those experiences, I was able to develop, I guess, just a deeper understanding of life and more purpose in life, more purpose around like what I'm doing and how I'm showing up, and like what am I investing my creative powers into, so it made me realize that life was short and that there's only so much time that we have here, and to really embrace every single moment, and to not waste it.
You think
That's
after
beautiful.
your mom passed away, you have your awakening?
Or maybe before?
Yeah, good question. So I because I was raised very in like in a religion, and I had I had a very deep understanding of like the universe from a young age, you know. So I remember when I was young, like 6 or 7, I would talk to my mum about I would like meditate, and I would look up at the stars, and I would ask powerful questions to myself. I always remember doing this, and I'd always ask like, how far does space go, and how long would it take me to get to those stars, and what's on those stars, what are those stars made of, and you know, I'd always ask those really big philosophical questions in my life. And I remember coming to really profound realizations at a young age, like about the quantum nature of reality, and how everything's energy, and how we can manipulate atoms and molecules through our mind. And I had all these big epiphanies from a young age. So I had the knowledge and the understanding, and I was able to, yeah, I was able to perceive that
Mhm.
part of reality. But you know, when you get older, like when you're in high school, you don't go around flaunting your quantum knowledge in
Oh
high
yeah,
school. Like
yeah.
it's not like I was just trying to survive. You know, I wasn't really. It was just yeah. You know, so for me, it was like when my mum passed away, I went through that denial phase of like just rejecting everything. And then when I went through a specific healing experience when I was healing a lot of the trauma around my mum passing as well as my father leaving. So I was doing a lot of like deep healing. I was doing, you know, that's where I got into like breath work. Breath work was a big tool for me to help me with healing, and plant medicine as well. So when I started to get into like the plant medicine and the breath work, and you know, diving deep within myself, that's when I had like a reawakening, I call it, which is where a lot of the stuff that I learned from when I was a kid, it really like just dropped in and anchored in, because I had a lot of really profound experiences that I've never had before, you know, seeing into different realities, and you know, connecting with like the spirit world, and all that kind of stuff, the stuff that some people would think is crazy. When I
Mhm.
experienced those like firsthand, that's when I kind of went through that
Yeah.
reawakening, as I call it, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned that you did the plant medicine as well as breath work. As someone that have done both, how do you compare them, the experiences? And because a lot, I feel like lately a lot of people are talking about like ayahuasca, like
Yep.
mushrooms, but then also breath work. Like what are your thoughts about it and your personal experience around it?
Yeah, I love talking about this. It's well, when I was 19, I became a coach. So I became a personal trainer. And when I did my personal training certifications, I got a job as a health professional on a cruise line. So it was like my very first job as a teenager, and I got to travel all around the world on this cruise line. And when I was traveling on this cruise line, we had to get certified in certain things. So I had to get certified in Ashtanga yoga, which I never previously even knew about, but I had to get qualified in it. So I did my hours for the yoga certification, and in the yoga certification, it was like a level one Ashtanga yoga, and in that certification, we learned about pranayama breathing and meditation, because we had to guide people through meditations at the end of our yoga sessions, right? So I was like this young kid from the hood, never really meditated properly before, prayed a lot. You know, I've definitely prayed a lot and connected, you know, to a higher power, but never really meditated or like practiced that before, you know. And I remember when we were doing the yoga training, they took us through our very first like pranayama guided experience, right, at the end of one of our sessions. And I wasn't expecting anything, but when I did that pranayama breathing exercise, I had like a remote viewing astral projection type experience where I left my body and I saw the room from a different perspective. And I'd never seen that before. It was like a new experience for me. So when I had that experience, it was quite mind blowing. And I never realized that you could go so deep within yourself to the point where you can like connect into this other realm or whatever it was. I didn't know what it was at the time. So when I had that was when I had that experience, you know, your brain changes after you have those types of experiences because you can't unlearn the experience. So when I had that experience, I was almost like looking for that experience again, like throughout my life. I was curious. It developed curiosity, and I was like, "What was that experience?" And I had little experiences like that throughout my practice because I started to obviously practice meditation and teach it and take people through classes and stuff like that. Um, but then and as I continued down that path, I started getting into different types of meditation practices. I did like transcendental meditation, got into like NLP and hypnotherapy, and then I went into breath work, like more activated, like Wim Hof style breathing. And I was just obsessed with it. It was just like a thing that I did throughout my whole journey because it helped me like stay sane in life, you know. And as I was going through all of that, I had these little moments, little experiences where I'd had these kind of like transcendental experiences. I didn't know how to explain it, but it's again, curiosity. It led me learning about different things, learning about different spiritual belief systems and ideologies, philosophies, thought systems, trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, you know. And then I remember specifically at that time that I was telling you about when I was going through that kind of deep healing around my mum passing away. I did a psilocybin ceremony. It was the first kind of ceremony that I've done before. I've never done a ceremony. In Christianity, a lot of like the ceremonies and like plant medicine is looked at as almost like witchcraft, like an evil thing. So I always had this kind of like resistance towards it. But as I mentioned, I was kind of breaking out of that old belief system and just experimenting, researching, studying. And I had this mushroom experience, and that wasn't the first time I'd done mushrooms before, but it was the first time I did it ceremonially. And when I did the mushrooms, I actually took myself through a breathwork practice. And when I went through the breathwork practice, and obviously I had the medicine as well, it really gave me that kind of first DMT type ayahuasca experience, you know, where I like went into a different dimension, saw all the visuals, the colors, and like all that, you know. I tapped into that space, you know, and that when I went into that space, I had a vision of what I understood to be my higher self, and it was like this big celestial version of me, and it was looking at me, and it was almost like telepathically communicating to me, and it was showing me my entire life. It showed me my entire journey. It showed me all the where I was born, the specific time that I was born, and why I was born there, where I was born, the family lines that I chose to work with. It showed me everything, like my whole like blueprint of life, and it was like kind of showing me what I was about to do. It was kind of like this is where you've come from, this is why you went through all of that, and now this is where you're about to go, and this is what you're going to be doing. You know, you're going to be helping a lot of people. You're going to be speaking on stages. You're going to be facilitating experiences for people. You know, you're going to be helping people go through what you're currently going through now. So that was like quite a mind-blowing experience. It really changed me after that. I wasn't the same person after that experience, because I've never had that type of experience. And because that was breath work that got me there, with obviously the medicine as a supplement, it deepened my practice with breath work. And I was almost able to tap into that same space all the time without the medicine. And later on, I learned more about the science, about the pineal gland and the brain and like DMT and all these chemicals and altered states of consciousness. And I did the research into that stuff to understand it more intellectually. But yeah, like those experiences changed my life. And I guess when coming back to your question, I always just recommend when I have these conversations with people is just really yeah, be curious and open-minded when it comes to these types of things, but also be very intentional with how you do it as well. Because I feel like there's like in the spiritual conscious community, there's that kind of spiritual escapism, spiritual bypassing type thing that happens. And I've definitely fallen into this trap before myself where you can get so caught up in all like the like the chasing the experiences that you escape from reality, if that makes sense, you know. And that's why, yeah, I always say, like, the main thing that makes the ceremony, or the main thing that makes them, like, helps the medicine do what it does, or the breath work, or the meditation, or whatever the practices that you're doing, it's really the intention behind what you're taking into it, you know. And that intention really curates the entire experience for you. It's like a seed that you're planting in the subconscious that plays itself out, you know. And I think some people may not have the best intentions all the time, which is why it can sometimes be counterproductive and actually negatively affect people as well, you know. So just being mindful around that.
That's awesome. Me and Chris we also had like a crazy experience with breath work, and it's definitely, you can't connect to
Crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Jesse, we saw on your page that you were also like a bodybuilder before, and
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that's
but that's a very
guys.
interesting topic, because I feel like there is a lot of, I know like so many men nowadays that they have the need to use steroids, otherwise they feel less of a man. And how did you get out of that, you know, culture? How did you escape from that mentality and going from that to becoming, you know, free from all of that?
That was, yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad that you brought that up. It was actually around, you know, so the interesting thing is that experience that I just shared with you about the, like, that ceremony that I did, and the healing that I was, kind of the healing journey that I was on, breaking out of the the bodybuilding pathway was a huge, well, it was at the same time. It was a huge part of that. So for me, I got into bodybuilding really young. I was actually a hip hop dancer. I've been a hip hop dancer for my, like, since I was like 11, and I actually danced professionally. So I danced in the dance crew. We became national champions. We were supposed to go and represent our country in the world champs in Las Vegas. And then we had some issues in our dance group, some political stuff, where we weren't able to pursue that path anymore, and it kind of created a little bit of it disconnected me from the passion of dance. And I stepped away from dance for like 10 years, and I picked it back up a few years ago. But when I stepped away from that, from the dance was like my, it was like my positive outlet in high school. Street dance is a big part of the culture here in New Zealand, especially in the lower socioeconomic areas. And yeah, it was like my safe haven. So when I disconnected from that, that's when I went down like the drugs and like the alcohol, and, you know, like that kind of pathway. And because I stepped away from the dance, what I realized is I had this, like, and I think this also stems back to my childhood, because my father left me, as I felt like I wasn't good enough. I had this like unworthiness thing. I also got bullied and stuff in high school. So I had this I had this unworthiness complex, and I felt like I wasn't confident in my true authentic self. So I felt the need to be someone else. A large reason why I got bullied was because I was really skinny. I was a skinny kid in high school. 90% of our school, the school that I went to, was Polynesian. I am half caste Polynesian, so like I'm not naturally genetically gifted like some of the full Polynesian boys. So I was like the skinny, light skinned half caste in a school full of like fully like men that had hit puberty at like 15 and like had beards and, you know, like gray hairs and all this kind of stuff. So you know what I mean? So because I had this like insecurity complex, and I wasn't taught, I didn't have that masculine role model to teach me about how to be confident in myself and how to be a man and embrace my own masculinity, my own natural masculinity. I felt the need to outsource it, you know. So that's why I got into steroids. I got into steroids when I was like 18. Yeah, and I went and I stayed on the steroids up until I was about 23, maybe 23. It was actually around when my mum passed away. So when my mum passed away, it's when I stopped. But during those years, I went deep into the competitive world, became like a fitness model, was competing in bodybuilding shows, had all the supplement and clothing sponsors, and I had like an online fitness personal training brand. Like I was the fitness guy. And I just got to this point when my mom passed away, when I went through that healing journey, I had this big realization, like I guess it was kind of like an ego death experience where I became aware of my ego and I became aware of like where I was being fake and where I had like this fake persona and where I was trying to compensate for or overcompensate for my my trauma, my wounds, you know, my you know, all the things that happened to me when I was a kid. So I realized that I had to come off it. I had to stop it before it got too late. And it was, I knew it was causing health issues. It was causing hormonal issues. It was creating more anger problems. I already had anger problems as it was already. So that like amplified them. It really got into my mental health. And I got to a point in my life where I was actually suicidal, and I actually tried to commit suicide once. And when I tried to commit suicide, it was in like it was before I went through that healing process that I told you about before. So it was actually like a couple of weeks before that ceremony that I had that I tried to commit suicide. And during that time, I was so lost. I was like doing heaps of like drugs. So I was doing not just the steroids, which was messing with my hormones, and so I had like the super high testosterone, real low estrogen. Estrogen was like up and down, so I was really emotional. But I was also doing like MDMA and like cocaine and like partying and drinking all the time. So my dopamine, my serotonin, my oxytocin was like this, like all week. So I was in these like I had real fluctuations in my emotions and my mental state. And I used to get these like mental breakdowns because I just couldn't like, I didn't know how to like handle myself. That's why the meditation, the breath work like really saved my life because it helps me. Like I said, I was being literal when I said stay sane, you know? So yeah, to answer going back to your question, I think, I feel like I might have even gone off track here, but I feel like that was a big thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Because I think,
Yes.
yeah, a lot of men can resonate with you and with your story, you know, that they have traumas that they never dealt with, and they
Yeah.
just use substances or, you know, steroids to mask off what they have underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially your case because you don't have your dad, right?
Yeah.
How was it?
But sorry,
Sorry.
yeah, so I'm so sorry. But today you have a connection with your dad or no?
Interesting story. So, I yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I've reconnected with my father a few times in my life. I attempted to heal the relationship a few times as well. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that I wanted it to. My dad was kind of in a state of denial. He didn't really want to take responsibility or ownership over anything that happened. So obviously, when you're healing and resolving a relationship, you need to have both parties really step up and both take responsibility.
Mhm.
I did my part. He didn't. He wasn't willing to even try. So unfortunately, I had to cut him out of my life temporarily. I still got hope that one day it could resolve. But unfortunately, it was actually earlier this year. Actually, I had to just create some boundaries because it was quite a. He's always been very. It's actually quite a long story, but he's always been very anti what I do. You know,
Yeah.
because I'm open about sharing my story. And he kind of went down the more religious path of like extreme Christianity. So sees a lot of what I talk about as like evil and like that kind of stuff, you know. So it got to a point where it was quite toxic and quite negative. So I actually had to create boundaries and kind of disconnect from him in my life, which was very difficult actually, but it was also very empowering because I realized I actually had to create those boundaries because there was that, I guess, that wounded little kid that was always trying to chase for my father's approval. And when I realized that he actually wasn't capable of giving it, like giving that love, yet, I had to kind of accept, like actually accept that and let go of that attachment, you know. And that was extremely empowering for me because it reflected back to what not to do for my son, and how not to show up, and it it indirectly taught me how to be a better man, even though it was under the negative circumstances.
Oh, thank
How is
you.
it like to be a dad now?
Man, it's been the most challenging and most beautiful experience, yeah, of my life. He's 10 now. He turned 10 about a month ago. Um, and yeah, me and his mum split up when he was about 2, and it was a bit rocky for a while, but we're in a really good place now. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. Yeah, it's a constant teacher because
Yeah.
every little behavior or every little, like, yeah, negative behavior or little thing that you can see as a parent, it it always has to be like, I always have to reflect upon myself of like, okay, where do I need to step up more? Where do I need to teach more? Where do I need to be more of a bit of an example? Where do I have to be more firm? Where do I have to be more soft? It's like a constant journey. And because get I didn't have a father when I was younger, it's almost like it's like I'm reparenting myself as I'm parenting my son, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Um, yeah, it's been a beautiful experience. But yeah, he's like my best friend. I'm gonna go pick him up later today, actually, and going for the weekend.
I
So
see
yeah,
that
love it.
the parenthood is a roller coaster,
Yeah.
roller coaster.
Because
It's
in
a
the
roller
end of the
coaster,
day,
man.
they're a reflection of ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's getting into he's becoming a teenager. So he's going through, his hormones are changing, and he's growing up in this world. The world that we live in is a very interesting place right now. There's a lot of interesting things happening in the world, and I think it's really important. What I've really found is important is just making sure that he knows who he is, he knows where he came from, and he has the ability to think freely and discern for himself. And that's a big lesson, to like discern what is right and what's wrong, and how to be a good person, and all those types of things, like values and morals, and what it means to be a man and a provider, and what masculinity even is. It's a learning process for sure, but it's fulfilling. I love it.
You did a
Thank
great
you.
job. You did a great job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
How you talk about sharing your experience. How did you get to this place of being authentic? Because when you go to your page, you're a spiritual coach, but you're like MMA, and like some people might see this as conflicting, but you
Yeah.
became to like, this is who I am. How did you came to this place to be comfortable with that? And I ask that because so many people, they're like afraid of being themselves, especially on social media. So what advice can you give to people?
It's really interesting that you asked me that question, because literally just before I came into this podcast, I went for a run in the forest with my dog. And I usually, if you go on my page, I'm always in the forest doing videos. It's because I go take my dog for a run, and then I just like film videos. And I actually filmed a video on this topic today, just before I came in, um, because it's a really important topic. And I guess I honestly don't feel like I've fully arrived at my true authenticity or authentic self on social media yet. I feel like I'm about to head into that phase for myself personally. It might look like I have, but what I've really learned about authenticity is that true authenticity is not just showing a part of you online, or not even just with social media. It's not just showing a part of you in general. It's it's actually being able to understand and embrace all of who you are: the good, the bad, the ugly, the positive, the negative, the light, the dark, the shadow, all of it. And I feel like a lot of people um, don't do the shadow work. Shadow work isn't something that is heavily encouraged in our society, especially in Western society. So we all have a dark side, right? We all have the negative memories and the traumas, the macro traumas, micro traumas. We all have the emotions that we have to deal with in life. Like when you're a kid, and or even as an adult, if you get angry, if something makes you angry and you feel that anger boiling up inside you, maybe your partner or your friend or a family member says something to disrespect you, and you feel that anger rising up inside of you, and you want to say it, and you feel your body like tense up and all the chemicals releasing through your body, that adrenaline, that all those the cortisol, you go into that fight or flight mode, but then you're about to say something, but then you hold it in and you suppress it. How many times do we do that in our life? Like so many times. And if you don't have the tools to be able to, I guess, effectively process those feelings or emotions, no matter what they are, positive or negative, it creates that dark side, creates that shadow. And I feel like the lack of authenticity comes from the lack of being able to connect with your own dark side and actually just connect with it, understand it, acknowledge it, see it, see yourself. And a lot of people develop shame around that part of themselves, especially men. I'm sure it's the same for men, women, non-binary, whatever, but we all have like these things that we might be ashamed of. I know I definitely have. I've definitely made a lot of mistakes in the past. And I feel like a part of your question was, I'm like spiritual person, but I do these other things and stuff like that. I feel like authenticity is about embracing all of who you are. It's about embracing like everything. And it can be challenging on social media because a lot of us on social media, we are, creators, we're entrepreneurs, we're creating personal brands. We're trying to build ourselves as a personal brand in this world so that we can collaborate and create and co-create with people and build and achieve things, which is all positive stuff. But the thing about, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs in our company, and the thing about personal branding is it can be easy to just focus on who you want to be and maybe run away from the aspects of yourself that you don't like or you're ashamed of. But the thing about the shadow is you can't escape it because it's always there. You can see it on the wall. It's like, see it? It's right there. So the shadow, you can't run away from it. And if you're running away from your shadow, then you're running away from yourself. So authenticity to me is, and that's why I said it's still a journey for me because I'm still learning this, but I feel like it's that part of you when it's just you by yourself and you're just alone with your own thoughts, before you go to bed at night and you're just lying there and you're just thinking about things and no one else is there, that's the real you, and that's not always a pretty place to be. Sometimes it's extremely chaotic and scary place to be, actually, so I think it's a journey of self-love, learning how to love all the parts of yourself. And that journey of self-love sometimes requires that self-confrontation, being able to actually like confront the parts of yourself that you're not proud of, or you're not happy with, or you're ashamed of, and shine light upon the darkness. And like Carl Jung says, healing isn't about imagining beings of light. Healing is about bringing the unconscious and making it conscious, and that could be a bit of a rabbit hole sometimes because the depths of the human psyche goes deep. It goes deep, so like when I've been going in my journey of like, diving into all the different parts of me, even the parts of myself that I'm most ashamed of, it's like it can be extremely uncomfortable to even admit that you think certain things or have certain feelings or see things in certain ways, but I feel like when you can learn to embrace your dark side, if you will, and channel it in a positive and a productive way, utilizing alchemy, alchemy, the ancient practice of transmutation, being able to transmute or transform the negative into positive, the darkness into light. That I feel is important so that when you do show up, you're not trying to like, you're being authentic in the sense that you're not trying to be someone that you're not. You're not wearing a mask and playing a role or identifying with a certain persona. You embrace all of who you are. And I'm still learning that because the truth is, what I've learned about social media is that, and this is like a real reality, is that I can post content. I know my audience really well, so I'm very intentional with the content that I create. So I can post content that I know is going to add value to people's lives. So a lot of my following, as an example, on social media, they majority of it's positive. There's obviously haters and trolls. There's always going to be that, but a lot of it's positive, you know. But what I've realized is like, man, if these people really knew who I was, I don't know if half of them would even like me. You know, if they actually knew the real me, like the stuff that I've done in the past, like like you know, all of my history, a lot of these people would probably judge the hell out of me, you know. So what I'm stepping into now, and this is a part of, like, I guess more of my creative journey, because I'm moving into a space where I'm going to be releasing a lot of my creative projects, music, art, dance, sharing a lot more of my story in creative ways. I've been like mentally preparing myself and I guess overcoming the blockages that I'm having about being authentic and showing all of who I am, because I feel like we can sometimes be afraid to express ourselves fully because we're afraid of that judgment or that criticism, or and that's why we mold ourselves to try and be this like picture perfect person, but in reality, like, we've got all this other aspects of ourselves that we just don't want to show people. So I'm kind of moving into a space where I'm trying to embrace all of myself, the light side, the dark side, and be able to express it all confidently, without shame. And that's kind of the journey that I've been on. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, of course.
Powerful.
Thank you. And you said that you want to share, you want to, express yourself more artistically. How did you get into
Rapper.
rap? Yeah.
You
And
are a rapper, right?
What was that? Sorry?
how did you get into rapping and being a rapper? And like, what is there a song that has a greater impact in your life? How do you find the inspiration to?
You still
Yeah.
sing and
Yeah, for sure. So it's I'm so glad that you asked me this question, because I started writing. So I've been like I said, a hip hop dancer for a very long time. So I started dancing when I was 12. I got into, I don't know if you know what crump is, but crump is a form of street dance, and I got into crump and then hip hop. And I fell in love with hip hop and the culture from a very young age. And rap was always the thing that, like, I was walking to school. I was the kid with the headphones, like listening to like my MP3 player with my like illegally downloaded music off LimeWire, and I was like listening to, I was like listening to these like rap, like gangster rap songs, and so I've always loved it. But I actually started getting into poetry quite early. So like when I was in like my early 20s, I started writing poetry and doing spoken word poetry. I've always been a speaker, so I started speaking when I was around 19, 20, like actually speaking on stages and stuff. So I started like incorporating poetry into my seminars and presentations, because I learned about adult learning theory and how people actually learn, and how storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to teach something. If you teach through storytelling, it kind of bypasses the analytical mind and it speaks straight to the subconscious mind, which is why people develop more of a connection through story opposed to just like education, for example. And so I learned about this from a young age. So I was like, I'm going to create all these poems and stuff like that. And then it just naturally progressed. Back in 2020, during the lockdowns, I had a lot of extra time, as I think a lot of us did. And I remember I was actually in a meditation, and I have like a daily practice where I kind of connect with my higher self and really tap into what I'm creating in business and what projects I'm working on, and I kind of tap into my intuition and get that, I guess, guidance, from my higher self to guide me through life, and my higher self came through with a very, very clear message, which was like, you're going to get into music. You're going to start making music. This is the natural next stage for you. And the next day I wrote my first song, which was called Freedom. You can listen to it on Spotify. It's my very first song that I wrote. And it was it was the most wildest experience that I've ever had, because it was like it just channeled through me. It was just like I never really learned how to like flow and rhyme, do the rhyme schemes and like all like structure a rap properly, but it just came very very naturally, and it just within 6 months I created my very first album. And that first album that I dropped back in 2020 was called I Am Eon, and it was really a journey. It was a way for me to explain and tell stories around the different, what I perceive to be my different lifetimes. Some people may not resonate with this, but I've kind of like tapped into different lifetimes, like different times that I've been on this planet. And I almost like drew wisdom and like knowledge from those different lives and turned them into stories that I was teaching lessons through. So that whole first album that I created was, each song was like a different character, which connected to a different timeline or lifetime that I've been in. And it was a way for me to like express the wisdom from those lifetimes in like a really creative way, with like an epic beat and like dope rhyme schemes. So it was a really powerful journey for me to get into it. And then what's really interesting, going back to the conversation about authenticity, is I put that album out, and when I started putting out the music, I got a lot of positive feedback, but I started to get some haters for it, and I started seeing people that once followed me were just like, oh, like he's going into his ego, and he's rapping about all these different topics, and he's trying to be the spiritual guy, but he's talking about all these other things, and like people have their expectations around how you should be and like what you should do, and I was like, wait a second, if I'm a spiritual person, what why can't I tell a story about something that I experienced growing up in the streets? Like, how is that not spiritual? Like that's kind of what I got into. So I think because I was a new artist, in the sense of putting art out to the world for the very first time in that way, I started to get that like imposter syndrome, and this is something that we work with a lot of our clients through in Light Warrior. Is whenever you go through a phase in your life where you're in a transition period, like you're transitioning into a new level of service or business or creativity, leadership, your business is growing, like whatever it is that you're doing, if you're being called into a new level, you're also being elevated into a new level of consciousness, right? And as you're going into this new level of consciousness, you're also going through an identity shift. Your identity, your beliefs, your self-perception changes, and it's not an easy process. It's a very uncomfortable, because you have to face a lot of fears, and a lot of those fears are like survival mechanisms that try to keep you in the old level, the old identity, the old paradigm. And that's what I've experienced in music, is like stepping into this new, I know it's a huge part of my mission in life, stepping into really embodying that version of me. I had to work through a lot of blockages, and over the last year, the last song that I released was it was just over a year ago, as at the beginning of 2022, and I took a year off releasing music, and I've just been making music, and it's been a huge focus for me over this last year of really working through all of those deeper fears and those deeper limiting beliefs, and fear of criticism, fear of judgment, fear of other people's opinions, really like working through all of those on like a deep level, because I've got this big project I'm about to release to the world, and I know it's going to really shake up a lot. The music industry, it's a big project, and I knew it was going to require a new version of me, and it was going to require an even higher level version of me, which is what I've been tapping into recently, which has been a really empowering journey, developing that unshakable belief in yourself, that you can stand in the light, so to say, and shine brightly and powerfully, despite what anyone else thinks, despite what hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people might think about you. a lot of energy to deal with, you know, as a creator, as a human being. So just navigating that has been a really interesting journey, but I'm excited for the next phase because yeah, there's a lot to show offer to the world.
Yeah, we're excited to
yeah.
listen to your upcoming projects. And what I was gonna say is, yeah, you
The
can.
retreat, yeah. Can you tell us about your retreat, the
Yeah.
Croatia?
Yeah, for sure. So like in Light, so I run a company called Light Warrior with my partner Sakula, and Light Warrior was created how long ago now? I think it was created about maybe 5 years ago now, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. I'm not sure, but we created Light Warrior to be a, you know, our whole mission statement behind Light Warrior is to empower creatives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders to really step into their zone of greatness, their zone of genius, and embody that greatest version of themselves so that they can make the biggest impact in the world. So we really like to work with change makers, people. We see things from a very collective consciousness level of if we can empower the leaders and the people of influence with that, like recognizing their true power within themselves, their true limitless nature, their true self, and embrace all of who they are so that they can show up authentically and powerfully, then they will be able to create from that place. And those people that create from those places create the most impactful projects. You know, so we work with a lot of people that run conscious businesses or conscious projects, authors, festival owners, artists, musicians, coaches, actors, speakers, you know, thought leaders. And our retreats are always like spaces that we create where we design and curate the space with the intention to really take these creators through a journey of internal transformation so that they can actually step into that new version of themselves. So it's the way that we look at it is it's like we're quantum shifting in those 3 to 7 days, realigning with who they are, realigning with what their highest purpose is here on the planet, realigning with that higher self, that divine self that they have within themselves, and anchoring that in, not just connecting with themselves, but actually creating from that space. Our main objective with our clients is to help them create what we call impact projects. So impact projects are like their business projects or their creative projects, whatever it is that they're investing their creative energy into, that are most aligned with their higher purpose and most impactful to the people that they're here to serve, their communities, and, you know, the world. So we help them go through that internal process of transformation so that they can discover or receive the download or the key codes, if you will, of what they're going to be creating, and then we help them anchor it and actually create it on a physical level. You know, so we actually help them develop the project, build the project out, build the team, and brand themselves adequately, and then put it out there to the world and make it an actual real tangible thing. So it's quite a powerful experience. We run you know, coaching programs throughout the year.
Yeah.
And our retreats that we run are a part of that experience, you know, and we run different ones. So we've got like our super yacht cruises that we do every year in Europe, which are amazing. Our next one's in Croatia. We've got one in Greece coming up. But then we also run in-person retreats as well. We've got one coming up next year in Ibiza, which is going to be really, really cool. We're working on some deals at the moment over there. Sweden, here in New Zealand.
Hi, Jesse. How are you?
Yeah, you guys can definitely come if you'd like. It would be awesome to have you. But yeah, we basically go to these really beautiful spaces. It's not always about the luxury experience as well. We like to create that luxury experience so that it gives our clients and our community something ambitious to work towards, you know, like a really powerful reward to go and spend 7 days on a luxury super yacht in the middle of heaven while you're connecting with yourself and creating, something epic for your business, like that's one of the coolest experiences that you could go on. It's life changing. So but it's not always about the luxury experiences, especially here in New Zealand. We've got a lot of, like Hawaii, we've got a lot of really sacred land here in New Zealand, and the mana and the energy in the land is very preserved, um, because the Maori culture here is very strong. Like we very much like Hawaii, we never like lost sight of who we are. We never really got taken over or colonized to a degree, so that we were able to preserve a lot of that mana, that wisdom, that knowledge that was passed down from our ancestors. So that's embedded in the land. So we have a lot of sacred spaces here. I'm sure you do there over there as well, where we like to run a lot of retreats here in New Zealand, where we take people to these sacred sites and help to just give them an opportunity to disconnect from the matrix for a while, disconnect from their business and their everyday life, and to enter into that sacred, that higher vibrational state, where they can have those immersive transformational experiences that will recharge themselves, so that they can go back into their life like aligned.
Amazing. That's how do you recharge yourself? Because as a coach to so many people and juggling like fatherhood and so many things, how do you
Yeah.
preserve your energy and recharge yourself?
Man, that's the golden question right there. That's a golden question. I'm not gonna pretend like I have it all figured out,
Yeah.
and say that these are my 10 steps on how to do this, because I still struggle with it sometimes. I feel like with being a high performer with multiple passions and responsibilities. I got a team, I got a family, got a son, got a business, multiple businesses. It's quite a lot to deal with. What I've learned is that you can set your life up to have, you can be very strategic and tactical with like how you set up your days, obviously, having time to recharge, to disconnect from everything. I make sure at least I have one day per week, usually like Sunday, where I just disconnect from everything, and I usually go out into nature. Nature's usually like my medicine that recharges me, because it just gives me time to be by myself with nature, and that's it. So I have waterfalls that I go to here, not too far from my house. Usually, like going into nature, I've got obviously my personal practices that I focus on, but for me, it's just making sure. Really, what it is for me that allows me to recharge is just making sure that I'm making time in my days and my weeks where I get to do everything that I want to do. So I got time to make music. I got time to go to dance sessions. I got time to do MMA, do my martial arts training. I prioritize time in nature. I prioritize time with my family. I prioritize time with my son, and I just make sure I have those times scheduled in and prioritized, so that when I do go back into like my productive work, like building the business and serving the mission, I am being nourished from all these different things that I really just am passionate about doing. Some of those things might be like a big, like training and doing martial arts and stuff might be like a big thing to some people, but for me, it's like where I recharge myself in some weird way. I don't know. I guess being punched in the face is how I recharge myself.
So, Jess, thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Thank
And then
you.
we would like to ask you one last question. And if you could leave only one message to the world, what would that be?
If I could leave one message to the world, is to be yourself. Honestly, it's be yourself. It's be your authentic self. We live in a day and age, as we've talked about today, where it's so easy to be someone that you're not. There are a lot of advancements in technology and artificial intelligence, which have a lot of positive things, that are on the horizon. But with that is also the negatives of losing yourself in the system, losing yourself in the matrix, losing yourself in the never-ending sea of information and content that's always being, going into our minds and our brains. And I think being yourself and finding who you truly are, finding like what you're here to do, like what your purpose is. That is what I would recommend, because when you can find yourself and you can find your purpose in life, or a purpose in life, you that provides you with meaning and fulfillment and happiness, because every single day you wake up and every single thing that you do is intentional. There's purpose behind it. There's a reason why you do it. It's for a greater reason, and that fulfills you and nourishes you, I guess, on more on a spiritual level, because it's deeper than just the materialistic things. And I've worked with a lot of people, they get caught up in the material world, material successes and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that you can't have nice things. You can absolutely have nice things. You can have it all, but it's just making sure that the foundation that you're building your life upon is aligned with who you actually are and what you actually want. Because there's a lot of people out there living lives that they don't want, and they're showing up every day as someone that they don't even want to be. So life's way too short to live a life not being who you truly are. So that would be my message.
Well, thank you so much.
Mahalo.
We really appreciate, all your wisdom, all your words. We're sure this is gonna enlighten a lot of our listeners that can resonate with your story. And a lot of us comes from trauma, and that's very powerful. And we are very grateful to have you here with us, and we are grateful for all the work that you guys are doing. And yeah, thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you. Mahalo.